and you will be given access to the meeting. If you have questions, any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in using the chat feature in the lower left-hand screen, and we will open up the line for discussion at the end of the webinar to make sure that all the questions that were asked are addressed. Finally, the PowerPoint presentation plus the recording will be sent out after the webinar today. It's my pleasure today to introduce the Housing Alliance Executive Director, Phyllis Chamberlain. Phyllis?
Great. Thanks, Joyce. Good morning, everyone. There has been funding available through the PHARE program for the past several years, but this year is the first time that the funds are available for every community across the entire state. And we, with all of you, worked really hard to secure the revenue source to make this funding possible. So thank you for everything you've done, because now you have the opportunity to increase housing opportunity for the people that you serve. It is $12 million that's available across the state, and that number is projected to grow. And while we're really excited about having secured that funding, I'll say that same thing with a different tone. It is only $12 million. And as this is a large state and there is a lot of need, it is going to be quite a competitive process. We at the Housing Alliance really do hope that a high percentage of funds go to serve those that are the most vulnerable, those that are experiencing homelessness, because we know that that is where there is the most need and the biggest gap in the availability of affordable housing. PHFA is hosting a number of webinars and has developed a number of great documents that explain the program to help you apply. But because the funding is so competitive, we wanted to host this webinar so that we could talk specifically about how the funds could be used to serve people experiencing homelessness. Bryce is going to go through what you can do with the funds in detail, but I just wanted to offer a few thoughts in the beginning about how you might make sure that your application is as competitive as possible. So first, you know that there are going to be a lot of applications that get submitted, and there will be a lot of applications that get submitted from your community. So to the extent that you might be able to partner with other entities and submit a joint application, you're likely going to be more competitive. And it frankly just might be an opportunity for you, if you're not already partnered with an agency that provides affordable housing, to partner with them. Housing is the answer to homelessness, and a partnership with a group like that could bring you opportunities that would extend beyond this grant and extend beyond whether or not you receive funding. The great thing about this program is that it is very flexible, but you really will need to think about how it's tied to a local housing plan, and in this case, the local continuum of care's priorities and plan would be what you want to consider and ensure that your project is aligned with that plan. If this is a one-off, if this project seems to be not related to what's happening with that plan and a little bit of on its own, you might not be as competitive. And if you could even get a letter of support from the local continuum of care, or whatever entity in your community coordinates a local housing plan, that would demonstrate alignment. Your project should, of course, align with best practices, and you know from writing grants that your ability to provide evidence that your project aligns with best practices generally gives you a leg up. So I am going to turn it over to Bryce so that he can go through the details. So let me introduce Bryce. Bryce Maretzki is the Director of Policy and Planning for the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. In that role, he manages all planning and policy development, including the design and implementation of program initiatives involving the housing and community development needs in communities all across the state. He leads PHFA's efforts in housing counseling, financial education, delinquency prevention, as well as strategies to promote community and economic development goals for the agency and the board of directors. His previous positions were in leadership roles at PHFA and DCED, as well as local work in the Pittsburgh region. Bryce, thanks for all of your work planning for this very exciting opportunity, and I will turn it over to you to tell us what we can do with the funds.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Phyllis, and it's really a pleasure, and I owe so much to all of you who work so hard. I think on behalf of PHFA, we owe you a great deal of thanks for your incredible work over these past few years, helping get the State Housing Trust Fund put together back in 2010, and then getting the initial funds with the Marcellus Shale money, and now expanding that to cover all 67 counties with the realty transfer tax. So to you, Housing Alliance, to all of you on the phone, thank you for your incredible work. Let me jump in and start sort of going through, give you a little bit of background about how we got to where we are, and then some details about the application, the RFP process, and some of the things that we're looking for out of that process. So back in 2010, the State Housing Trust Fund, also known as PHARE, the Pennsylvania Housing Affordability and Rehabilitation Enhancement Act, was signed by then Governor Rendell. At the time it was signed in 2010, it was meant to be the vehicle to draw down and bring to the Commonwealth the national housing trust funds that were expected at that point as part of the national Fannie and Freddie's revenue that would come into the National Housing Trust Fund. With the economic crisis at that point, those funds were put on hold, and so there were no national funds, and the legislature did not appropriate any state funds into the State Housing Trust Fund. So for a couple of years, until 2012, and the passing of the Marcellus Shale Impact Fee, Act 13 of 2012, there was no funds in the program, and it sat dormant. Beginning in 2012 and the Marcellus Shale Impact Fees, there began to be a revenue stream into the PHARE State Housing Trust Fund program. The challenge there was that at that point, those funds could only be used in counties or communities where there was active well drilling, active Marcellus Shale vertical well drilling, and that included about 37 counties in the Commonwealth. So over the past we've now made 5 years worth of 5 rounds of awards through the Act 13 Marcellus Shale funds. We've awarded about 188 projects, funds totaling close to $40 million out of those funds. About this time last year, House Bill 792 was signed into law by Governor Wolf, creating Act 58 of 2015. That brought in a new revenue stream into the State Housing Trust Fund PHARE program. And the way the PHARE funds work under this program, under the Realty Transfer Tax program, is that the legislation says that there was a baseline estimate of 2014, fiscal year 2014, of $447.5 million for the realty transfer tax. Anything above that amount in future years 40% of that increase comes into the PHARE program to address housing needs. And it caps out ultimately at $25 million, but for this year, 2016, we anticipate that we have received about $12.6 million into the fund. We'll have to, again, the way the formula works, it can fluctuate from year to year, and the cap can get to $25 million. We hope that over the course of the next couple of years we'll get to $25 million, but it is dependent on the payment of the realty transfer tax, and obviously then the real estate market, sales market across the Commonwealth. But that's the way the formula works. So a couple of important provisions under the State Housing Trust Fund. We are required across the entire fund to ensure that at least 30% of the funds go to households below 50% of the median area income.
Bryce, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Can you maybe speak up a little louder? We had someone who was
Sure.
asking.
Is that better?
Yeah, that is. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Sorry. So the first provision under the State Housing Trust Fund that we are required under the legislation is that at least 30% of the funds have to go to households below 50% of the median area income. The second provision is that we are required to produce an annual plan and put it out for a 45-day public comment period. And the third legislatively mandated requirement is that we do an annual report to the legislature about the expenditures of the fund, including all revenue sources. So the other piece, so when we were looking at the beginning back in the Act 13 in 2012, when we began to receive those funds, we wanted to make sure that we could address sort of a wide range of housing needs. So while we knew that we were required to at least have 30% of the funds go to the below 50%, we also added a policy provision in the RFP and have continued that through the realty transfer tax, that funds can go up to 200% of the median area income. Again, we would encourage you, many of you have looked at the plan and provided comments to us when it was published, and we would encourage you to continue to refer back to that plan as part of your application review and as you're putting it together and thinking about the kinds of projects that you will be doing. And then again, the last piece is that we are required by July 1st of each year to produce a report for the legislature. So with the realty transfer tax funds and these $12.6 million that's available for this year, we put out a draft plan. Our board approved that plan, and we opened up the RFP for this year in mid-October, middle of last month, with applications due for this first year of funding of this program in January 13th of 2017. Again, all 67 counties are eligible under this set of funds. As Phyllis said, it is only $12 million. It is $12 million. It is only $12 million. And we know that there are going to be lots of far more need than there is funds available. But we are very excited to have the program open and beginning to accept applications. One of the other things that we changed from the Act 13 Marcellus Shale funds into this program was that we now have allowed anybody, any unit of local government, any nonprofit organization, any for-profit organization, redevelopment authorities, downtown improvement districts, community development corporations, to apply for these funds. We really thought that it was important that we open up the doors and see what all the kinds of applications could be to address the widest variety of needs. This, I think, will help in terms of bringing new resources into new projects and new programs, and it'll also allow us to sort of see the breadth and the depth of the work that you guys are doing across the Commonwealth. So a couple of requirements that we're imposing on each application, and again, because we are required to meet this 30% test, we have asked that each project commit to setting aside at least 30% of the funds for the population below 50% of the median area income. We feel that that's important. We tried the first year under the Act 13 funds to not have this provision, and it was a challenge to sort of ensure that we could get to the 30% threshold. And so in subsequent years of that program and rolling into this program, we have decided that we would ask each applicant to commit to meeting that test. And again, that funds could not benefit households above 200% of the same median area income. Additionally, we limit the administrative costs on the program to 5% for any project award. And we've received a number of questions about this particular issue, and I'm sure there will be additional questions going forward. We would encourage you, we have put together a fairly lengthy frequently asked questions document based on questions we've already received over the past few weeks. And we would encourage you to go to that document on our web page at www.phfa.org. And if you go all the way to the bottom of the page, there's a PHARE tab. And under that tab, under the realty transfer tax, there's a frequently asked questions document. It's a very helpful document, and it's growing each day as we get additional questions and provide responses to applicants. The other requirements that we'll be asking for as a part of the submission is that you're required to give us one hard copy of your application and one electronic copy in a CD form, and those would be submitted to Clay Lambert by the January 13, 2017 deadline, 2 p.m. deadline. Additionally, we will ask for those projects that are awarded funds. We will be asking you to provide us with semi-annual reports to allow us to sort of both monitor the progress of projects as well as produce the report that we're required to do for the legislature on an annual basis. So every 6 months you'll be getting notification from us about your semi-annual reports being due. We anticipate that we'll be making recommendations to our board for approval in April of 2017. And we'll move quickly there to get funds, to get out grant agreements, letters of commitment, contracts, and funds into the projects. Again, we've received many questions already and would encourage you to write additional questions to us. Again, it helps us in terms of putting together this frequently asked questions. You're welcome to submit those to me at my email address that's on the bottom of the slide. Let me go through I'm going to quickly sort of skip through a number of these components, but I think they're important to at least highlight. The first is really the goals. And as Phil has talked about, we're looking for projects that are ready to go, that can use these funds quickly, can implement quickly, can leverage additional resources that are connected to local housing needs and priorities, and that have capacity, the organization, the applicant has capacity to get the project done. We are trying to, again, meet across all 67 counties. There's lots of local priorities, and we realize that, and we are going to do our best to try and meet as many of those needs as possible with the $12 million, and we hope that this $12 million is able to leverage significant additional funding from other sources, whether it's other private sources, other public sources. And so, under the Act 13 funds, we've seen anywhere from $5 to $6 of leverage from each dollar we've invested into those through this program. So we're hoping that we can get to that same level of leveraging. We want to address the most significant and persistent housing needs, right? So in many places there are already existing housing plans that talk about the most challenging needs in communities in terms of housing, and we would like to see those projects, make sure that those projects come in and with an identified gap in their funding or expanding services that we could potentially look at putting these resources into. We want to look at comprehensive approaches, right? We recognize that, as Phil said, that demonstrating alignment across programs, across partnerships, across organizations is critical to the success of housing efforts. And so we're going to look at how comprehensive approaches are taken to address needs as a part of a community's overall plan. We want to target locations and issues that have had significant disinvestment of resources over time. Again, we want to maximize the resources that we have and leverage it against other resources. And we hope that these funds will show that partnerships and encourage you to look at the kinds of partnerships you're putting together to address housing needs. We're going to try and prioritize and focus on vulnerable populations, including homelessness, veterans, reentry, persons with disability, elderly, and families and youth. We're hoping that through all of these documents, the webinars, the plan, the RFP, the allocations, that we can be as efficient and effective and as transparent as possible. We're more than willing to have conversations. We probably won't be able to get out and do visits of projects before the RFPs are due, but we hope to get out and visit projects once we've made awards. We're happy to provide as much technical assistance, and Clay Lambert on my staff has been terrific in providing technical assistance to many of you. We're more than happy to continue those efforts, conference calls, whatever vehicle is easiest for you to help get the kinds of information you need from us. And we want to see, again, we have to meet the 30% income test, 30% of the funds test going to households below 50% of median. We also recognize that in many communities, a mix of incomes and a diversity of incomes, a range of incomes, will help address both project financing as well as community development needs. So we would encourage projects to look at that. The components of the RFP include sort of a short narrative, and this is sort of the first tab in your RFP submission. It's a very short summary of your proposal. What's the need and the impact of your particular project? What's the local housing market conditions? How will that need be addressed by your particular project? Where specifically are the use of the PHARE funds and this program going to be used? And then the anticipated outcomes and impact of the particular project. The next section of the RFP includes the financial plan section, which includes detailed financials about your project or your program. And again, we have great flexibility under the PHARE program to address a lot of different components in the housing, from supportive services to rental assistance to down payment assistance to first-time home buyer work to acquisition and rehabilitation to new construction to rehabilitation of existing units. We can really, there are very few limits in terms of things we can't do with the PHARE funds to address housing needs across the Commonwealth. So we encourage you to think creatively about the kinds of needs that you're addressing and how these funds can be used in places where maybe other funds cannot be used, or it's harder to put those funds into place. And that's where this financial section, we're going to be asking for as much detail as you can provide about the financials, the sources of funds, the uses of the funds, the overall project. Again, we recognize that the PHARE awards are likely to be only one small portion of the overall funds necessary for any project or program. And so what's the total funding picture look like, and how are those other commitments in place, or what needs to be done to get those into place? Again, I talked about, and Phyllis talked about, the importance of partnerships. We would encourage sort of multi-partner applications. As a part of the RFP, we would ask those partnerships to sort of explain the role and detail the role of each partner in the process. So if one organization might be providing kind of case management and down payment or rental assistance, and another organization then follows up with doing permanent placement or locational services or first-time home buyer efforts to help people move from rental into home ownership, we would want to see how that partnership works and the role that each of the partners plays. The timeline, again, we want to get these funds into projects quickly and used as quickly as possible by projects. We ask that projects are prepared to fully commence within a year of receiving the funds. Again, because we need to show to the legislature that these funds can be used quickly and can show an impact. We're asking each of the applicants to help us make that case to them over the long period of time. Under the comprehensive plan section of the RFP, we've broken it up into whether you're proposing a development project, whether it's a for sale or rental development project, versus a supportive service, housing service project. For development projects, the pieces we're looking for are the site control. Do you have an option to purchase the site? Do you already own the site? Or is it going to be a site that you will have to go out and secure? Evidence of zoning conformance with local land use plans, a map of the site showing where the site is and sort of the surrounding area. If there has been an appraisal done of the property, we would encourage you to submit that. It's not a requirement. You don't have to go out and have an appraisal. But if one's already been done for a particular piece of property that you're looking to use for a development project, we would encourage you to submit that to us. The overall development budget, hard costs, soft costs, and any other costs included as part of the overall development. The marketing plan for how you're going to market the units, whether it's for sale or rental, and at what various rent levels, home sales prices, and any market study that you might have done as a part of a project. And I know in some of the projects that have tax credits and are going to be coming in for PHARE funds, they've done market studies. There may be communities that have done sort of overall market studies for housing. related to a neighborhood, we would encourage you to submit that. But again, it's not, you don't have to go out and secure a market study for your project. For housing supportive services programs, what we'll be looking for under the comprehensive plan section is, again, a very strong description of the project, the organization or the agency that's leading, and their experience sort of in providing that program, their history in doing it, their capacity to do it, their success, how they're looking at best practices in terms of that program. The geography of the program area, some programs might be targeted to a specific neighborhood or even a couple of streets within a neighborhood. Others might have a larger geographic footprint, a county-wide or even a multi-county geography for your particular program. What income groups are you targeting? The overall program budget that's been approved either by the board of directors of the not-for-profit organization or of the local entity, the overall program budget. And then where will the FARE funds again be put into the program, and how will they be used specifically in the program? The last piece of the RFP is the fact sheet, and this is, again, there's an Appendix A fact sheet and an Appendix B fact sheet, depending on whether you're doing a development project or a housing support service program. And you can see this is a very, again, it's sort of a fill-in-the-blank kind of document. It's very helpful for us that we'll be using this as sort of, we refer back to this document on an ongoing basis. We'll use this when we discuss projects with our board for funding. Again, it's a very high-level way of us having a sense of what is being proposed in your application. The applicant name, the kind of the applicant type, how much is being requested, what the overall project cost is, who's being proposed to be served, the rent purchase price, the address, location of the units, and then very importantly, contact information. We will, for many applications, we probably aren't going to have time to go back and get lots of additional information once we receive your application, so we would encourage you to submit as much information as possible at the beginning. But once you're awarded funds, we will need a contact person to follow up on an ongoing basis with implementation, disbursement of funds, contracts, and other kinds of documents. Again, you can, at our website, you can find a number of the documents, including the RFP, the frequently asked questions. We've done one webinar, and we'll be doing another one next week, and then a third one in December. And those PowerPoints are up on our website as well. And finally, the contact information for both myself and Clay Lambert, and then the mailing address for the agency in terms of where you're going to submit your RFP application. So that brings us to the end of sort of my prepared comments. So I'd really like to, again, thank all of you and encourage you to think about what the projects you're doing. We've already had some wonderful conversations with organizations and groups and potential applicants about the kinds of efforts they're thinking about. And we encourage you over the next couple of months to keep thinking about where you could use these funds and what kinds of needs are not being met that could be met with these funds. Be realistic in terms of the kinds of asks that you're putting together for the FARE funds. I would say less is more. In this sense, I mean, we expect that there will be a large volume of applications requesting far more than the $12 million available. And we're not sort of saying there's a maximum amount you're going to get, or there's a minimum amount you're going to get, or there's a minimum amount you should apply for. We're really putting that sort of responsibility on you to be realistic in terms of what you need to significantly expand a program, do a new project, address a particular need that may not be being addressed. And so, we ask you to be careful and sharpen your pencils as much as possible in terms of your request. We likely will have to reduce requests for those that we do fund, and we will have to say, unfortunately, probably there will be applications that we will not be able to get to for this year.
Bryce, thank you so much. This is Joyce
Yeah.
again. We did have a question typed in from Kathy Cravelin from Valley Youth House. Can you give more information about what constitutes a housing/supportive service project? Maybe provide an example. And
Yes.
Kathy, if you have a follow-up question, just hit *7 and that'll get you off of mute.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So a housing supportive service project could be a homeless shelter that provides case management, wraparound case management to a family to help them get into permanent housing, helps them find the supportive services that they need to address that housing, whether it's first and last month's rent, financial education, access to schools, to health care. So the FARE funds can pay for both the case management portion as well as things like the rental assistance component of that kind of program. Does that help address? We could do something like a housing counseling agency. If there's a housing counseling agency that wants to expand their housing counseling efforts to target a new group of potential home buyers, they could apply for supportive service under the program side to help a staff person do additional outreach to provide new services into an unmet population for housing counseling.
The other thing, if I could clarify too, and this is Joyce from the Housing Alliance, I think to reiterate what Phyllis said in the beginning, that it should align with the local COC or the plan in the community. From HUD's perspective, and I think the way you described it is a little different, away from emergency shelter and more towards permanent supported housing and rapid rehousing. So just wanted to throw that in the mix, thinking about it that way too. As a former director of a 300-bed emergency shelter, the days of large places like that are sort of
done.
gone. So I just wanted to be clear, or just state that. The other question we have from Jeff Rich from Clinton County: can agencies that currently receive FARE funds from Shale apply for RTT funds to supplement their existing projects? Certainly.
Yep. Again, these funds are available. All 67 counties are eligible to apply. We will probably be we know that we have funded many efforts in the Marcellus Shale communities over the past 5 rounds of funding there, so we will probably be trying to fund some new projects in places that haven't received FARE funds, but we certainly would encourage existing Marcellus Shale projects to apply.
Thank you. Again, Jeff or Kathy, if you have any follow-up questions for Bryce, do *7. We have another question from Diana Kerr. Is there a local match required, and will there be an effort to distribute the funds geographically?
There is no local match required. We certainly will be looking at how these funds leverage other funds, but there's no required match for these funds. In terms of will we be looking to distribute these geographically, we're going to look at, we have a lot of data that we're going to look at as a part of our overall assessment of the applications. We won't, until we see the applications, we won't, we don't know what we're going to be able to fund. We will try and address needs across the Commonwealth, but we don't have X amount that's going to go to, the Southeast and Y amount that's going to go to the Central region and another amount that might go up into the Northwest or something like that. So but we certainly will be doing our best to meet needs across the entire Commonwealth.
Thanks, Bryce.
So there's a non-answer for you, Diana.
We have a question from Leslie Perriman from Monroe County. Can these funds be used to supplement already existing COC-funded projects?
Yes, although we would probably, if it's a case where you've lost funding from another source and you need, you may need it to, continue a core set of efforts, we would, consider that. We probably are not, if you're just going to move one pot of funds to another, supplement these funds from another source, we probably would be less, that's probably going to be a less competitive application. But we recognize that there have been a number of funding sources that have been reduced over the last few years to address housing needs, and so we realize that these funds might be necessary to plug gaps in existing services across a number of projects and programs.
Thanks. We had some clarification that it would be to expand and enhance.
No, we want to make sure that we know what we're, what the impacts are going to be of the program, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't just have to do an expansion kind of effort.
Two questions. What is the term of the grant for those programs awarded?
Yeah, this has come up. So we don't, there's no requirement that you have to spend the money in a certain period of time. We ask that projects commence, if it's a development project, that they begin construction or rehabilitation within a year of the time of their application or time of their award. But we've had projects that we've funded with the Marcellus Shale funds that have used their funds over multiple years, and that's fine. We don't, we won't pull back the funds if you don't have it all used within 18 months or something like that. Again, we're trying to get fund projects and programs that can use the money quickly, can get it deployed fast, so that we can show progress. But there's no requirement that the funds can't be used for an extended period of time.
We have a question from Craig Newcomer. Under development opportunities, is there opportunity for phase projects if a 5-story building working on a phase plan for use by floor throughout a 5-year plan, creating housing opportunities available through phases to be in complete working housing program by the end of the 5-year plan, as to not apply for all the money at one shot for the whole development plan. Of course, depending on the project complies with all FARE guidelines. Craig, it's Joyce. Maybe you can, to unmute, do *7. Does that question make sense, Bryce? I'm not sure.
I think I get it. I'm assuming it's got multiple phase. It's a multi-phased project, and they want to plug FARE funds into at least one phase of it, and maybe multiple phases. We don't know. We can't make future year commitments on FARE funds beyond this year for projects. So, you'll have to apply every year, and as long as you can meet the 30% provision in terms of targeting those households. We would be fine if you used it on one phase and then, in a subsequent application applied for a subsequent phase of the project. Yes, we have done that. We have done efforts like that where we've funded multiple phases under the Marcellus Shale funds, so we would be willing to consider that. We would want to see the entire sort of project to completion as a part of the application, and then where you would be targeting the PHARE funds as a part of that.
Thank you.
That's everything, Joyce. Thanks.
You're welcome. We have a question from Roger Steffi. Can PHARE funds be used to match federal funds that require a non-federal match?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. That's easy. Will a PHARE program be an annual application cycle at or above this year's $12 million in future years, and will the application cycle be at the same time in future years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we're looking for 2017, right? Again, the way the formula works, let me first address the funding. The way the formula works, we won't know until till the end of July of each year when the Department of Revenue certifies the realty transfer tax revenue to the Commonwealth, how much we actually will have available. Now we track, sort of informally track the transfer tax numbers each month as they're published. They're already down this year from last year. I will state that. So the fund can fluctuate either up or down. Our hope is that it will continue on an upward trajectory until it reaches the $25 million cap, and at that point it would cap out at that level. But it could be less than that next year. So that's the first phase of the project. First quarter. So the second one is the application timing. So for what we're proposing for next year, and we're still in some discussion about this, is we're going to try and do some better synchronization and a single application for a variety of the PHARE funds, because we have the Act 13 Marcellus Shale money that has had a separate RFP. We will soon have we'll soon have about $3.8 million of National Housing Trust Fund money that we can put into projects. And now we have the Act 58 Realty Transfer Tax Fund. So our plan for 2017 is we actually have a single application RFP, and you sort of check the boxes in terms of if you're an eligible Marcellus Shale county and you just want to apply for those funds, you check this box and you do these sort of documents. And sort of we're going to try and simplify the process, but that it'll probably mean that we're going to not put out the RFP until we're thinking probably September of next year. Is sort of when we're thinking about doing it. We're still sort of working on that, but likely again sort of in early fall of next year. We have to do it after July because we don't know what the RTT number will be until the end of July. We know what the Marcellus Shale money is by about the middle of May, and we're still trying to figure out the National Housing Trust Fund money. So stay tuned for 2017. We will be doing a plan that outlines all of this stuff probably in the spring of 2017. So it's a long answer to your question. I'm sorry about that.
Thanks, Bryce. Back to a question about shelter from Leslie Perriman. Can these funds be used to develop shelters or to support a daytime homeless resource center in conjunction with ESG funds?
I mean, the answer is yes. it is an eligible use. Again, I think the overall sort of goals as a part of HUD are to move to permanent housing as soon as possible. And we certainly will be looking at projects that can move into those or moving toward that sort of effort as quickly as possible. But certainly the FARE funds can be. I mean, it is an eligible use of the funds. Yes.
Do we have any? Well, that's it for the write-in questions. If anyone wants to ask Bryce a question, hit *7. Again, *7. It's been very informative. Thanks so much, Bryce. We're so excited there's money in this year.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to have all of you partnering with us. Thank you so much.
And if anyone offline they can just reach out to you or
Clay? Yeah, please call me directly. Email, preferably email, because then we can begin to continue to build the frequently asked questions. And again, I would really encourage, as you're thinking about your application, to use the FAQ document. It is getting larger and larger by the day, and so I think it's a very helpful document. We're actually going to try and go back in now and put some categories so that it's a little easier to use and things like that. So we're going to try and make it a little more user-friendly. But I would encourage you to do that. But please call me or email me. We're happy to set up conference calls if we can to provide sort of one-on-one TA as well as email kinds of questions.
Again, thanks everyone for joining us today. And have a good weekend. Thanks again, Bryce and Phyllis.
Thank you.
Take care.